Welcome to the Morning Nerdy News. I'm your host, Gray Falcon. We have quite a few big news stories today, including the PS5 teardown that went live first thing this morning, and the MSI scandal that is going on. So we're going to go ahead and dig into these early this morning, but I'm going to start off with the PS5 teardown. I'm just going to click through this video so you can see the different things, discuss a couple of things that are going on with this that I see personally that are good or potentially bad things, and we'll just go ahead and talk about this. Remember, we are live right now, so if you have any questions, concerns, make sure you type them over here, and I'll do my best to address those as I am going through this. So first up, where they have a look at the outside and they show the first couple of ports, which is a USB Type A port for the typical high speed USB. Now, this isn't the blue marked one, it isn't marked as the 10 gigabit like the USB Type C port is here down below. So it's one less high speed port. I don't know why you would kind of shortcut having that extra 10 gigabit port on there. Given that if you have the high speed one, it is still going to be backwards compatible. So this is a little confusing to me as to why they would make this decision, but I guess it could reduce cost in a small way. But if we continue on through the video, we see that they do have two others that are USB Type A ports that are the super speed 10 gigabit speed. So not really sure why the decision was made to try and confuse those ports. Anybody who doesn't do a lot with computers or doesn't really have experience with this could find confusion with trying to set things up, especially if they are supposed to use specific ports. So that, yeah, again, something I disagree with. They should have made them all the same to help reduce confusion on what is supposed to be used for what, for however these perishables or other things are going to work with this device. And then we have the gigabit internet, so our LAN port there, and an HDMI, which they list as, I believe, 2.0. No, sorry, they don't give a specific on that at all. They just say HDMI out port. I would assume this is a 2.1, not a 2.0. Sorry about that. And that would allow for you to get those 120 bit, or sorry, that would allow you to connect to your TV for 120 hertz TV or monitor to get that really high refresh rate and that higher frames per second. And the kind of older looking ACN power connector spot. We've seen this type of cord used on older PlayStation systems, and it's interesting to see that they are going back to this design where it's not really proprietary, but not very common in use. So you're not going to be able to go and pull out an old power cord from a computer or a TV or something and plug it into this. You're going to have that special cord to things. And we're going to move on through here, and they show the faceplates, well, the air vents next to the faceplates, but the faceplates are really the most interesting thing that comes up next, because this thing has air vents all the way around it. You saw that it goes up and around the back for a lot of them, and then it still has them that where it comes down and through the two sides. But the side plates, if you get in here, actually slide and pop off, and they'll actually show that after the stand, because the stand has this little screw that you can undo. You can then store in here, and you can pull this little plastic piece out and pop it into the bottom of your system to cover the hole where this screw goes in the base of your system. So that allows you to then turn it on the side, clip the same mount onto your system while to lay it flat. So this is being used universally as either a vertical or a horizontal holder for this system. So you can just kind of see through here where it takes that off, drops the screw in there, and then he twists this. So it has a little twist mechanism where you kind of slide it, and then it hides this under here so you don't lose the screw, which I think is good engineering for that part. I mean, it's a lot of over engineering in order to make this thing sit vertical or horizontal, where previously you didn't have to have this extra setup in order to do it. but it does give us the ability to do it and make sure that we aren't going to lose the parts and pieces, which is smart of them to go in there and make sure that's taken care of. And then they show how it clamps over the edge here near where the USB 3. USB 3.0, the high speed ones for this, right next to the Ethernet port to hold this on its horizontal side. And then this is where he comes in. He kind of bends that up in order to get it up. So this has some flex to it. You can see right through there. But much like a PC, it slides that side panel right off, which is going to allow for us to go out and purchase customized side panels without having to do stickers or other items. You can actually pop these off and update your console look without having to go in and buy a specialized console. You can potentially, Sony will sell these side panels in black or possibly other colors that you can buy separately and just pop on there. It's very Nintendo Switch is what I would say. I would say that they took inspiration from the Joy-Cons on being able to slide those off and put on different colors and just have that different experience. So I think that's kind of where they got this idea. So you'll be able to customize the actual look of your console as time goes on. So if you don't like the all white, it doesn't match your aesthetic, I wouldn't be surprised if these are available from third-party makers to have different pop-ons, or even from Sony itself on day one to just go out and purchase and make your console look to match what your room looks like, so you get that artistic feel without having to have it clash with your room. And as it goes in through here, the exact same thing for the other side. It just slides up and pops off. So again, cool little ability for this to just come off so easily and work. And because it slides this way, you can tell from the drive being right here, the base plate sits on this end. So when it's sitting vertically, it's pushing down so those plates don't accidentally pop off. So yeah, that comes off. We see the fan here, and this is a really cool look on the inside of this, how it seriously narrows down the actual look of this. And I could see that we could end up getting custom setups for being able to have this without the extra stuff on. That might help with cooling. Of course, that's going to help bring dust into your system as well. So give and take with that one. But maybe we get some custom magnetic filter or something that can be placed over this. So you could have those side panels off with some sort of custom special look to give more airflow into your system to keep it cooler. Again, we don't know how hot this thing actually gets. Right now we have reports of the Xbox Series X getting hot, and these are kind of the same technology, so I wouldn't be surprised if they both run on the warm side. So he goes through and disassembles all this. He shows where there are different access points for being able to get in there, for screw holes. And he just comes through and starts taking these things apart. This right here is he's taking off this plate right next to the air vent, and this leads into what appears to be the M.2 drive for the PCI Express 4.0. It's a little blurry here, but that appears to be the plug-in with screw hole locations, so you can screw that into there. And then once you have that set, you'll be able to have that extra expandable storage set up for your system. And then he continues on with taking out additional parts and pieces here. So in this breakdown, there's this little like sticker here. So if you remove that, Sony is probably going to know that you've tampered with this in order to get on the inside of the system. This is basically a tamper sticker is what that is. It's got a little bit of padding in there. It's pretty thick. It's going to be noticeable if that is missing or detached, and that way they'll know if you voided your warranty by opening this thing. And then continues on with the teardown through here, and he gets into pulling up these plastic fins that pop off and around. These are where the heat and the venting come up and through around that front side of the system. And then he goes in and unscrews the actual fan. So it has this metal piece on top of this. I don't know if that's kind of a mounting bracket type setup for this to give it some stability, or what the full purpose of that, because they don't put any filter on this. It just allows air straight through. I would hope that maybe we could get a filter that actually attaches underneath of this or on top of this, preferably underneath of this, in order to help keep dust from getting inside of the system. That would be easy enough for any consumer to pop those side plastic panels off of, pull out, clean off, and drop back in there to reduce how much dust gets in their system. But that's not a standard thing right now. So if you are part of the industry, if you are a third-party manufacturer, please create something that works with this. Find out what the size of this is, something that can just preferably has some flex to it, just slides in there, attaches, won't hurt the system in any way, shape, or form, but just helps keep the dust out of that in order to help keep things cool and clean inside of our systems. And then they slide the actual fan out, and oh boy, that is a beast of a fan. When they said they were spending more on a fan, they were right. They went out and wanted to make sure that they had a big old boy to ensure that it gets plenty of air pull through in this system. You can kind of see that this is probably scooping air through and pushing it all the way through, because it does have the circle vent kind of mounting plate on both sides, so it's pulling air in and through it. So we'll see how well that works, but later on you'll see kind of how the heating system pulls through on this in order to show how this is going to affect why this is up at the top and how the rest of the cooling goes for this. So as we get through here, and yeah, it just points to the cooling fan, just another angle of it there so you can see how that is moving the air. And we get down here, he's got this plate here that he removes next. And I'm sorry, he removes the rest of the ventilation here and then removes that plate. So more little plastic pieces that come up and off of here. You can see that pops off, and now you can see more of the actual board that's going on in here. And now he removes that metal kind of shielding that contains the actual drive. So if you have one that has the 4K Blu-ray drive, this is removable and replaceable by simply taking out this entire unit, and then if there's a problem, you could potentially go out and purchase another one and drop it in there without having to fully tear down the system, kind of like what you would do in a typical PC for this. But it doesn't really show any wires attached through here for this, so I'm not sure how this is connecting through, because you'll see it's just kind of screwed on. So somehow this has to have some sort of connection, but you don't really see any type of wire that has to be separated for this connection to happen with this drive. So maybe we'll get a little bit more detail on that later on, but there you can see the full Ultra HD Blu-ray drive unit. So if you were doing 4K discs, you'll be able to play those on this, which is something PlayStation has lacked, but Xbox has went to when they did their iterative steps with the One X and One S. But when PlayStation went to the Pro, they didn't have this available. So it is nice to see that we are getting this feature upgrade if you purchase the disc version. And just continues to give other views of this. Again, you don't see any wires that really connect into this. There are wires from here, and this is with that trace separated, but they don't really show how these are removed or how they connect into the system. So just for this teardown, this is obviously one that's already been broken down to for the pace of the video, to ensure that it can be done quickly without having to show using the little tools to disconnect these wires where they plug into. So we'll need a little bit more in depth of a breakdown later on to get all of this information. And then as he continues on through here, you can see that he's starting to try and take apart this aluminum plate. It looks to be an aluminum plate that presses down on the board. So now he is disconnecting other wires and things that do connect to here for this aluminum kind of, I'm guessing that's to help with heat on the overall system. But that isn't the primary way of reducing heat. It's just part of that whole setup. It also gives some stiffness for holding the board in place, kind of just like how you would have that bracket inside of a PC to hold up your motherboard. And we get further in here, and you can see they have these brackets here, and these brackets are on the back side for, I believe that's where the CPU is going on the other side of that, so that would be a CPU bracket for that. And still kind of undoing some of the wiring and stuff for all of these kind of plug-in things. So you can see him then come in, take the screws out for the bracket, and we get to see the back side of the actual unit here. So kind of like the pin connector there, but I don't know, it's a little weird, and hopefully we'll get a better breakdown on some of the other sites, but this just came out this morning. Haven't had a whole lot of time to look at this, so potentially go over this again or some more details later on. But then we have like the memory here. So this would be the 16 gigs of memory for everything. So this is the GDDR6 memory that they're using, and this memory is going to be for both system and GPU. So shared memory in this instance. But so not to get it confused with the AMD graphics cards, which are listed to be or expected to have 16 gigs of memory on their own. This is a shared instance, so we could see this reduced down to 12 or even only 8 gigs available to graphics processing, and having the rest of that memory, up to 8 gigs of it, being taken over for CPU processes. So, you know, that's kind of a give and take with these systems for what they're doing with consoles. Xbox kind of does a similar thing with their setup, where it has the shared memory between the two. So then he gets the actual board out, and you can see the breakdown of everything here. This is their little I/O, their special controller for their SSDs, and these are the built-in SSD. It looks to be soldered on, so you won't be able to go in here and update the internal SSD setup on this. Unfortunately, those are very much stuck at what they're going to be, but we do have the expandable storage on this, so it's not as big of a deal, and they do make it quite easy to get in there and actually add in that expandable storage. So you can just get another photo or image of that coming up and out of the system. Again, that kind of bracing plate he laid just right back down on top of there as he picks that up and flips it over. So continue on there. Yeah, so that is the CPU. So that is the Zen 2 Ryzen. So this is not Zen 3. Tomorrow, I believe today is the 7th. Yes, today is the 7th. So tomorrow we do get the announcement of the new Zen 3 processors from AMD that are going to be a generous step up from these, if the rumors and everything is to be believed on the benchmark leaks and from what AMD is supposedly saying about these. But right now, this is still using the current tech that you would be able to purchase today in a computer and setup if you were getting an AMD type machine. And they continue in with the breakdown here. They just give a closer look. This is the AMD Radeon graphics engine right here in the middle of this. So Sony Interactive, you can see the actual code for what this chip is. So their specialized chip for this. It's RDNA 2 based graphics engine, but it's not a true RDNA 2 system from what we found. Supposedly there are features of RDNA 2 built into their system, but it doesn't take advantage of the full capabilities of what their new cards are going to do, and those are being announced on the 28th of this month. So we'll find out more about the full capabilities later on, but as of right now, we're just getting some of the advantages of that system, but not all the capabilities of that in the PlayStation 5. And we'll continue to scroll through here. He's showing off the 16 gigs of GDDR6 there. I believe they actually put an arrow to it. Yes. Yeah. So the little memory modules there all the way around. And continues on with this. And this is where they're talking about the SSD and the special I/O. and that's the custom SSD controller where the I/O for the super fast processing is happening, similar to what NVIDIA talked about in their presentation. Only this has onboard stuff. So on the actual motherboard for this product, you're going to be able to take advantage and get that full scope of what's going on with this. And from here, let's see here. A little bit more talk about that. Again, this is all in Japanese, so playing the actual video doesn't do a whole lot of good unless you actually speak Japanese. Some of the wording, though, so for instance, the I/O, a lot of the words are the same in Japanese and English because that's just the words were created that way, and they're kind of used universally, so you can kind of pick up that information as you listen through it to hear what they're talking about. And of course, they also have the little lines that point to the different objects in English to tell you what you're actually looking at if you wouldn't know from a standard PC build or aren't into that type of thing. And they continue to through with the slides. Now this is an interesting part here, though. So cooling, they're showing the cooling for the graphics and the CPU, and they are using liquid metal. So typically you would use a paste. Most computers or standard items that you purchase from, say, Dell or something, or they're going to give you a paste for cooling, and the pastes do work well. For the most part, they are very standard. You don't get a whole lot of variation in paste like you used to. Once upon a time, you could buy a really cheap paste and it was not going to work as a good thermal compound in comparison to what it does now. Nowadays, you'd be hard-pressed to even find a cheap paste that isn't going to do the job. A more expensive paste is still going to do a better job than a cheaper paste most of the time, but not always. But when you get into liquid metal, this is where things change. You can get a significant reduction in heat on the CPU, on GPUs, and other parts of this by simply having this this liquid metal paste on there. So it's not actually paste, but liquid metal compound on there in order to transfer heat off and keep the system cool. Now remember, the fan is way up here. So right now they're not cooling this directly with a fan. They're just using this metal paste, but they have we'll get in here. That's showing a closer look at the liquid metal, a heat pipe setup and fins. So very similar, and there it is. They're pulling that up and out of the base of this, and you can see there where it directly contacts with where the CPU, GPU setup are for cooling. And we can come in here and we can see all the fins that they have in this, very similar to what the NVIDIA 3080 and 3090 graphics cards look like. Just lots of heat fins and lots of copper. Copper is very important in this point because the copper ensures that the heat will be properly transferred. There isn't much that does a better job of transferring heat than copper. Possibly gold, but you can imagine how stupid expensive that would be to try and do that. So copper is the way to go with these things. And then they have the aluminum fins. These are probably CNC'd out individually. So they go through, they set up a CNC machine to set up and get all these fins created and have this metal plate that is attached to the copper cooling. And we'll go in here and see the heat sink. If I can get that image to come up. There we go. And we can see the different heat pipes coming through into these fins. So the heat pipes attach to the copper plate. So this copper plate that is connected to all of these different things absorbs this heat, transfers them through these heat pipes, and goes up into these fins. And these fins then help dissipate the heat up through the system. So you can kind of see how these drive upward, up and out from where the primary heat sources are coming from in order to help dissipate that out and away from the GPU and the CPU to help keep those cool. And that pushes it up to where that fan is. So that fan that's pulling in cool air and then pushing it back out the other side in order to keep this heat flowing up and pushed out of the system. So I think there's some excellent engineering that has gone in with this. It's similar to the way that Xbox has done theirs, but Xbox has a true straight up pull like a chimney. So that's why we're getting so much talk of all this heat coming out, and the talk of it running quiet but feeling hot. But that's because they have good cooling, and that cooling is enough to draw it all up and out of the system and just force it through the top in order to help keep the primary parts cool. So this, in a very similar way but a little more traditional way as a PC, is doing that. So this would be very similar to something that we typically see in a lot of laptops. So you have this heat setup with all these pipes running through and around and into these fins to help cool things, and it has the fans drawing in air. But instead of being underneath the system like most laptops, because this is designed to sit vertically, it's designing it all to pull the air up and out and blow through that cool air to drive the hot air out of the system at the top. Or if you turn it on its side, kind of the same thing, where I'm sure it's designed so the fan spins and pushes the air out, so heat probably comes over and in. This is spinning from down here to pull air in and push it out and draw the hot air out, would be my guess as to how all of this is supposed to work. And it continues on, and we get, the last few little things unplugged. So power, this is, you can see the little plug in there, so this would be the power supply built inside of it. And then he continues to take apart the remaining fans and ventilate, well, not fans, but ventilation pieces and the other electronic bits that are attached to those, so you can get a full look at what all the individual pieces look like from inside the system once it's spread out on a table for the full look. So that pretty much covers everything with the PlayStation 5. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.